We must reinforce our strength at home and safeguard Canadian workers and businesses.
Tariff on Canada is a tax on Americans. That's exactly what's going to happen.
We will implement reciprocal procurement rules.
Canada delivered the first $12 billion blow in Trump's trade war. And this month, America's northern neighbor has retaliated in a manner that few in Washington anticipated. The purpose of Donald Trump's threat of a 35% tax on Canadian goods was to demonstrate his might. Instead, it has sparked one of the worst backlash in the history of North American trade. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney placed $12 billion in retaliation tariffs on U.S. imports in August 2025, which sparked a supply economists and business executives warn that a chain shock might get out of hand. Tell us in the comments who you believe will blink first in this tariff battle, and stay informed by clicking subscribe. It couldn't have come at a worse time. The United States inflation rate is at 2% annually. What kind of effects might Donald Trump's tariff and trade policies have on prices? Additionally, households are finding it difficult to pay for necessities. This dispute goes beyond trade. According to Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, who broke with the White House, is a tax on families. Every extra dollar spent on tariffs, he cautioned, will be felt in petrol stations, grocery stores, and auto payments. We will not be intimidated, Carney said in Ottawa, adding that if Washington decides to impose tariffs, then Canada. The confrontation started with Trump's letter to Carney, which was made public on Truth Social, warning of a 35% customs duty. The era of Canada taking advantage of the U.S. is over, Trump wrote, claiming that Canadian metals and autos were hurting American jobs. His comments were broadcast live, eliciting cheers in Canada's parliament and causing investors on Wall Street to tremble. We woke up to find our contracts with Toronto partners effectively void. A 50% penalty wipes out our profit margin overnight. Canada will adjust its existing counter tariffs on U.S. steel and aluminum product. The retaliation was more severe than many had expected. Steel and aluminum tariffs were raised to 50%, immediately adding billions in costs for American exporters. We were planning summer promotions on soda and beer, but those are now on hold, a Coca-Cola executive said, referring to the sudden spike in prices of essential inputs such as electric vehicle motors, Ford F-Series pickup trucks, and even beverage cans. According to the American Beverage Association, aluminum sheet prices have risen to over $3,500 per ton, the highest level since 2022. We'll see price increases in the coming weeks. Ford Motor Company, on the other hand, calculated that if tariffs continue, it could cost up to $800 more to produce each pickup truck, which would be a devastating blow in a market where profit margins are already thin. Canada's action also sent a strategic message. 90% of the steel and half of the aluminum used in U.S. manufacturing come from Canada, and Canada consumes 15% of U.S. steel exports. If tariffs continue, Ottawa is reminding Carney added a new requirement to strengthen its position. Every ton of steel must have a digital carbon passport that tracks emissions from furnace to mine. Our hydroelectric advantage makes Canadian steel among the cleanest in the world, said Francis Lant, head of the Canadian Steel Producers Association. If the United States wants to claim leadership in green industry, it cannot ignore where its materials come from. In order to support domestic producers, Ottawa announced a $1.5 billion emergency package for Quebec smelters, which was praised by workers but deemed inadequate by industry leaders. The Canadian Aluminium Association issued a warning within a week that credit requests for plant expansions had already surpassed available funding, saying, "We are under severe strain." Association President Jean-Paul Richard, some facilities may experience cash shortages by winter if U.S. tariffs stay at 50%. We will not back down, Carney reiterated in a press conference, although he remained defiant. We shall always remember what was done to us. Markets have been shaken by the escalation. The Toronto Stock Exchange Metals Index dropped 4% in a single day, and U.S. automakers' stock tumbled as analysts cut their earnings projections. Less than 24 hours after Ottawa's counterattack, the price of cold-rolled steel, which is necessary for both new electric vehicles and traditional pickups, increased by $2 per ton. We are in uncharted territory, said U.S. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm, and these tariffs are jeopardizing our electric vehicle strategy at the very moment we are trying to accelerate adoption. Ordinary North Americans are already feeling the pinch on the ground in Detroit. David Ruiz, a worker in an auto plant, stated, "Shifts were being reduced over time. Prosper supply was the foundation of our livelihood. The rules seem to have changed overnight. Do I cut production and risk layoffs or raise prices and lose customers?" Sarah Dupont, the owner of a small beverage firm in Montreal, complained that the price of cans had increased by 27% in just 3 months. She inquired, "In any case, The president is gambling with people's wallets, said Senator Amy Klobuchar. And we should be negotiating, not escalating. In Washington, lawmakers worry that an election-year tariff war will alienate suburban voters who are already feeling the pinch of higher prices. In Ottawa, opposition leaders wonder if Carney's hardline could backfire, but polls show strong public support for standing firm against pressure from the United States. Analysts caution that the standoff could quickly escalate, with tariffs reaching as high as 70% by early fall if new negotiations fail. The Bank of Canada projects that such a scenario could shave 0.88 percentage points off North American GDP within 6 months. According to economist Doug Porter of Financial Group, this is not just about steel or aluminium. Investors are holding their breath as of tonight. North America's integrated economy, which was once hailed as a model of cross-border cooperation, is now teetering under the weight of political brinkmanship. Trump faces inflationary pressures that threaten his re-election bid, while Carney positions himself as a defender of Canadian sovereignty. Trade relationships built over decades will have severe economic fallout if they collapse. Already been lit. And for companies ranging from aluminium smelters in Quebec to auto factories in Michigan, there might be no turning back. From a steel and aluminium tariff dispute to a full-scale economic war with Canada using its most potent weapons yet, the Midwest aluminium premium jumped 54% to $1,270 per pound on August 21, 2025. Wood Mackenzie experts cautioned that if the full 50% duty is carried through the supply chain, an extra $70 per pound could be added, causing what one analyst described as an inflationary shockwave not seen in decades. The packaging industry was the first to suffer. Aluminium foil, which seems insignificant but is essential for food storage, beverages, and medications, became the starting point of the trade war. According to Montreal beverage manufacturer Marc LeBlanc, the price of cans has increased by 27% in just 3 months. His frustration reverberates throughout Canadian factories where overnight cost hikes are forcing companies to consider layoffs. However, aluminum's role extends far beyond soda cans, as it is essential to industries ranging from construction to aerospace. Airbus Canada confirmed that fuselage component costs are up double digits. Even the price of bottled water has changed, and small businesses like mine are now either raising prices or closing. Every link in the chain feels the pressure when the backbone of modern industry is targeted, according to TD Bank economist Bayada Karanchi. Detroit Long, the emblem of American manufacturing, has been hardest hit. Since July, bicycle manufacturers in Vancouver have reported wholesale cancellations of U.S. orders. Economists warned this chain reaction could ripple through everything from supermarket shelves to aircraft as would cause demand to collapse. Ford acknowledged that tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminium now add $850 in additional costs per vehicle, which is especially devastating for its best-selling FS Series pickups. Anderson Economic Group, Samsung SDI, confirmed that imported copper separator films and aluminium-coated anode foils, which are necessary for battery production in Indiana and Michigan, have increased in price. It was estimated that tariffs on autos and parts alone could cost Americans more than $30 billion in the first year. Prices in the pickup segment could rise by up to $8,000 per truck, an unprecedented burden for working-class buyers. During a congressional hearing this morning, Michigan Representative Debbie Dingell bluntly said, "The tariffs meant to protect American jobs are instead strangling our auto future." Rivian executives privately warned shareholders that supply chain costs are eroding margins to the point of near-zero profitability. By enacting tariffs intended to protect American industry, even the White House is suddenly in a difficult position. Ironically, Washington's own EV policy has been undermined. Tariffs may increase by as much as 70% by the autumn if negotiations are unsuccessful. According to the Bank of Canada, such a scenario may cause the GDP to drop by zero and wipe out billions from the North American economy. 88% in just 6 months. Although GM Ultium and Tesla Rivian have not yet stated if they will hike pricing, they have all acknowledged that their second quarter earnings will be as thin as battery foil. Canada, on the other hand, has not backed down. Rather, it has taken a daring countermeasure and doubled down. The introduction of the $4. 3 weeks after the start of the tariff war, a Canada Green Steel Fund worth $8 billion was announced. The fund seeks to reposition Canadian industry for long-term dominance in addition to defending it. This goes beyond just survival. In Ottawa, Prime Minister Carney said, "It's about grabbing the future." The project's scope is astounding. ArcelorMittal Dofasco has already used one in Hamilton to convert its operations to hydrogen-based electric arc furnaces. $8 billion Canadian dollars. Aloma Steel in Toronto was awarded $420 million to replace its blast furnaces with electric arc technology. According to industry insiders, these initiatives alone are responsible for over $2 billion in pledges. The other two, over the course of the next 18 months, $6 billion will be made available to carbon-intensive companies through Canada's Net Zero Accelerator program, which is an $8 billion framework. The Ministry of Industry in Ottawa has officially designated EV batteries and steel as strategic national objectives. Clear-cut carbon emissions from the steel sector are expected to drop by 60% by 2030. 3 million tons of CO2 will be eliminated by Dowasco's hydrogen transition yearly, while Aloma Steel has committed to using recyclable scrap for 70% of its production, connecting Ontario to Detroit's electric vehicle supply chain. From mine to furnace, every ton of Canadian steel will now have a carbon passport that details its origin and energy source emissions. Business executives refer to this as a geopolitical move as well as an environmental breakthrough. According to Daniel Breton, president of Electric Mobility Canada, Canada is creating a new map for North American metallurgy. By fusing EV supply chains with clean steel, they're positioning themselves as essential to Detroit's future. Analysts on Wall Street concur. In a report published this morning, Goldman Sachs predicted that once carbon passports are adopted as the industry norm, Canadian steel exports may see a 15% long-term market premium. The ramifications are serious for Washington. What started off as a tariff sword is now a tactical snare. Trump's tariffs may have sped up the process that makes the U.S. more reliant on its neighbor by encouraging Canada to invest in clean metallurgy. Michael Froman, a former U.S. trade representative, called it ironic. America might have given Canada the competitive advantage for the following generation by attempting to penalize them. Who will bear the agony longer is the question tonight, not if tariffs will hurt. By portraying Canada as the champion of clean business and patriotism, Carney is mobilizing support at home. There is no end in sight to the retaliatory fire that has engulfed every industry, from pickup trucks to soda cans. Economists caution that the current numbers are still preliminary. This is not the end of the battle, as Carney himself stated in Parliament. This is only the start. We will react like the United States has, never before seen. How the dairy market in Canada is tightly regulated in terms of production, pricing, and international access. In order to protect Canadian firms and workers from the unfair U.S. tariffs, we must strengthen our position at home. What if I told you that Ontario abruptly cut off America's milk supply, reversing billions of dollars in dairy sales in a single day? This summer, that is precisely what took place. Ontario made a daring move on August 21st that shocked Wall Street and Washington. The province rejected all U.S. milk entering Canada in a direct protest of Trump's tariffs. In just 48 hours, more than 200 containers worth more than $3 billion were returned across the border. It wasn't a street demonstration. No hashtags, no shouting. It was deadly, silent, and decisive. On Thursday, Ontario Premier Doug Ford stated, "This is about safeguarding our agriculture, our consumers, and our sovereignty." Washington will soon realize we have our own instruments if they believe they can use tariffs to intimidate us. The economic stakes are very apparent. Just in Ontario, the dairy sector contributes about 89,000 jobs, $5 billion to Canada's GDP. Rejecting U.S. exports was presented as a matter of survival rather than retaliation. In Ontario and Quebec, dairy is a staple food for households, not merely a product. It's ingrained in their lifestyle. This is more than just business, as Quebec farmer Jean-Luc Tremblay told CBC Milk. It's ancestry. We lose more than just money if we allow American oversupply to destroy us. We become less of who we are. Even when the United States protested, Ontario remained steadfast because of that cultural pillar. However, don't be misled. The consequences, it was harsh south of the border. Trucks of rejected cheese, butter, and yogurt returned to the already oversaturated American market in a matter of days. Prices fell because demand couldn't keep up with supply. It was described as a catastrophe by the U.S. Dairy Export Council and the National Milk Producers Federation. According to their joint July report, U.S. dairy losses in just 18 months were anticipated to be above $7 billion. In Wisconsin, the so-called dairy state, where there are currently less than 7,000 farms in operation, the fewest in contemporary history. We're drowning in our own milk. What Canada sends back, we cannot sell. The price drops faster than we can milk the cows. How did Canada manage to pull this off? A Wisconsin farmer told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. The solution is found in a system that most Americans had never heard of before. Management of supplies, covering dairy, eggs, and poultry. It was first implemented in the 1970s and serves as a buffer for Canadian farmers. Tariff rate quotas, or TRQs, are a mechanism used to strictly regulate imports. Just 3 in this instance, up to a specific maximum. 6% of the USMCA trade agreement's dairy market in Canada. Goods from overseas manufacturers can be shipped duty-free. However, Canada drops the hammer as soon as that line is crossed. Tariffs that reach 245, 250, 5% on cheese, an incredible 298 and 5% on yogurt, 5% on butter, make U.S. products unsellable right away. In other words, Canada claims that you can bring us a few buckets of milk, but if you try to dump truckloads, you will be charged 3 times as much until you stop. This is the reason Ontario's rejection was an enforcement strategy that was successful rather than a chaotic one. Prices were steady, farmers maintained a steady income, and grocery shelves in Canada remained well supplied. Chaos, meanwhile, was spreading like wildfire south of the border. The dairy crisis has already resulted in the loss of 37,000 manufacturing and agricultural employment in the United States since April. The maths no longer make sense for a large number of American farmers. In Pennsylvania, in just 3 months, the profits of a mid-sized farm with 400 cows fell by 28%. The cost of 100 pounds of raw milk decreased from $17 to approximately $12. Washington attempted to reply when owner Mark Anderson told local radio,